Okay. So once again, today is 5th of January. So back in November, right? I came up with a story. Go give me a story. It's called Kafan Chan, and I kind of teased it on Instagram, and I said I was going to drop it, and I never really dropped it. I was just procrastinating when I was going to drop it. So I kind of like, and that was way back in November. We're in January now, 2025, right? So that's like 2 months, right? So I kind of feel guilty about just teasing it and not dropping it. So I always wanted to like make up for it. So I'm still going to drop the story, but it's not now. So while we wait for it, right, I'm going to drop another story. I think I'm going to call it. The Towel of Babel. It was a story that like the Holy Spirit just put in my head when I was like bathing today. So it's going to be very short. The story is going to be very, very short. So short that I'll be able to post it on Instagram essentially instead of like putting it on YouTube. Right. So the story is about, again, like the name implies, it's called the Towel of Babel, right? Not Towel, Towel of Babel, right? So it's like a feminist twist on the Tower of Babel, you know. So just like reimagine the story of the Tower of Babel as like a feminist tale, right? So it's like Tower of Babel. So so let's go, right? So like I said, the story is going to be very short. And I'm going to try to make it as short as possible so I can post it in Instagram, maybe in parts, like part 1, part 2, part 3. Each part is going to be like a minute. So maybe like 7 parts minus this one. Maybe plus this one is going to be 8 or something like that. Just something very short, essentially. So without further ado, let's get into it, right? So the story is very compressed. I'm compressing it a lot, you know. So it's going to be a very short story. I'm sorry. Right. Again, it's open source. If anybody thinks it makes any sense and you want it, you can have it. Okay, so let's go. The story starts with Nimrod. There's a king. It's called Nimrod. He's very sick. So he's been thinking about eternity and, you know, making a name for himself. And, you know, and he felt like the best way that he could like make a name for himself was to build like a monument that would like outlast him, you know. A monument that would outlast him, right? So, but he could not like come up with anything in his head. So he called his right-hand man, Shehu, right? And he told Shehu that Shehu should like go into like Samaria and then assemble all the smartest guys he could find. And then, you know, bring them to the palace, give them food, give them drink, you know. And then at the end of like 30 days, they should task them with coming up with like a monument that would like outlast him, you know, that would be like a monument to his name so that when he dies, people will be like talking about him essentially. Something that will like last forever essentially. So Shehu went around the city and, you know, assembled 120 bright young men from the city of Samaria, right? And he put them in the palace, and they were eating what the king was eating. They were drinking what the king was drinking. And then he told them that at the end of 30 days that they had to produce like a plan or a monument, a plan at least, come up with an idea of a monument that would outlast the king, right? So out of the 120 men that Shehu assembled, right, 2 of them were very outstanding. 2 of them were very, very brilliant, right? And they were, surprise, they were best friends. One of them was Jajar, Jajar, and the other one was Uruk, Uruk. Uruk was named after like the great city of Uruk in Samaria. So Jaja and Uruk were like best friends, right? Now, Uruk was very intelligent, but he had a problem. He was also like he was a drunk. He had like a drinking problem, right? Jaja, on the other hand, had like zero. He didn't have any addictions. He was just like this very street guy. You know, he was just very ambitious. You know, just like he was a go-getter essentially, right? And he was ruthless, right? So they were best friends, right? So they were both living in King's Palace, and then, you know, Jaja, on the other hand, Jaja would like, he took the assignment seriously essentially. He would just wake up and like start racking his head for a monument that would like befit the king, right? Eventually he came up with a chariot. He felt like in fact, it was the one that invented the wheel, you know. So he came up with a chariot and he was like, you know what, I'm going to invent a chariot. And this chariot is going to be a legacy for the king, right? The wheel, essentially. A golden chariot. So that anywhere they are using the wheel, it would be the name of like and it was going to name the wheel after Nimrod. So anywhere that the wheel was being used, right, it would be like a testament to the name of like Nimrod, essentially. So that was his plan, and he had already drawn a plan about it. Jaja, so that was Jaja, right? But Uruk, on the other hand, Uruk was like, he was just like lazing around. He was just like drinking, always going to like the king's wine house and just drinking and drinking. In fact, he made friends with the daughter of the wine just like a barrister there, essentially. But she was a woman. Her name was Anu, Anu, right? So he made friends with her, and so she would serve him a lot of wine. He would get drunk, and Jaja would be the one to come and like fetch him from like the palace. From the palace, he would come and fetch him from like the wine house and like in his drunk state and take him back home, right? So the 30 days was almost up, and Jaja had already come up. He had already concluded his plan of like of building a chariot, essentially. His genius invention of the wheel, but so he stayed in his house for 2 days. He didn't come out. He didn't go to the palace. He was just in his house working on the project. Now, Uruk, on the other hand, so he didn't know what was up with Uruk. So after I finished, he went, again, I'm rushing, I'm sorry. So he went to Uruk's place, right? Uruk's room in the palace, right? And then he discovered that he went to the wine house, essentially. He thought Uruk was going to be at the wine house. So when he got to the wine house, he discovered that Uruk was not there. So he brought some wine. And then he asked he asked Anu if Uruk was there. And Anu was like, no, that Uruk hasn't been at the wine house for the past 2 days, that she had not seen both of them. And then she thought that they were together or something. I was like, no, that he has been in his room all along, right? So he brought some wine. He bought like a jug of wine for both of them. And then he took it to Uruk's house, right? Uruk's room, right? So when he got to Uruk's house, he saw that, surprise, Uruk was very sober. He wasn't drinking. And then he saw he was working on a plan, right? So he was like, what are you working on? And then Uruk was like, while he was sleeping, while he was drunk, the last time he was drunk, that he took him home, which was like 3 days before, that in his sleep, he had a dream, and then Satan came to him in a dream. And then Satan took him to a very high mountain. And then Satan showed him this building, a building that like towered from like the earth and reached the heavens. And told him to build that building, that was a building that was befitting for Nimrod, that would like outlast the name of Nimrod, you know. So so he said that was what he was working on, and that he has been working on that plan since. He hasn't even had time to drink, and that's like what he's working on. That is almost finished, in fact, right? That is just the only thing remaining on the plan was just for him to pen his name, right? And he asked Jaja that what was he working on. Jaja was like, oh wow, like his own plan is not as ambitious as his own, and that he was just working on like on a wheel, essentially, or a chariot, essentially, a golden chariot for the king, right? So and that also he brought them wine, right? So he gave Uruk the wine. But Jaja, I said Jaja was very ambitious. So immediately Jaja had like Uruk's plan. He discovered that Uruk's plan was like was superior to his own, and he wanted the plan for himself. So he just took advantage of the whole situation and gave Jaja the wine. And then Jaja was like, would you like to drink some wine? He was like, no, that he wants to like put some finishing touches on his own plan. So he has to like focus on it. And Uruk was like, I'm almost done with my plan. I need to put my name on it and I'll be done. So Uruk started drinking once again, and then he started drinking, and then he got drunk, essentially. He got drunk to stupor. So when he got drunk, he slept. And then Jaja hatched his plan. He swapped his evil plan, essentially. So he swapped their project, essentially. He took Uruk's Tower of Babel project and then put his own name on it, and then took his own like golden chariot project, and then used, he forged Uruk's handwriting and then wrote Uruk's name on it, and then he went home. And then he took both projects and went to the king's palace, straight to the king's right-hand man, Shehu, and submitted it to Shehu and said, this is him and Uruk's project. And Shehu was like, why didn't Uruk come and submit the project for himself? It was like, he was like, Uruk is drunk, he's at home. And Shehu was like, oh my God, he's drinking again. So Shehu took both plans, right? And then he said that, so the next day, essentially, I'm rushing again. The next day was the day they were going to announce the winner for the winner of the competition, essentially. So Shehu took both plans to the king, right? And then the next day, when Uruk woke up from his drunken stupor, right? When he woke up, right, we had a hangover, and then he discovered that his plan was missing. And then he went straight to Uruk's place and to Jaja's place, and Jaja was like, he submitted the plan for him. So he was very, very happy. He thought like, this guy is a friend in need, a friend indeed, He even takes me home anytime I'm drunk. He was just like very grateful to God for Jaja. So essentially the king called all of them into to the palace, and he was going to announce the winner of the winner of the competition, essentially. And then when the time came to announce it, he said, the king started talking about how one of them, worked on this project, this very brilliant project, a project that would cement his name as the greatest king of all time, a project about a building that will, reach to the heavens, a place where everybody on earth could live in, a Noah's Ark on steroids, Now, when the king started saying all those things, right, Uruk was very happy because he thought, he thought it was him, of course, because that was his project, right? And he thought that was it. He had made it in life. In fact, he was already planning how he was going to make Jaja his second in command, right? And then the king was like, so he didn't even listen to 90% of the king's speech. He was already drifting. His head was in clouds, essentially. And then all of a sudden, the king called Jaja, and then everybody started clapping. So he thought the clapping was for him. And then he realized all of a sudden that, it was Jaja. And the king called Jaja, and then he put a purple robe around him and made Jaja the head of all the architects. He made Jaja the second in command, in fact. In fact, Jaja was ahead of Shehu now. Jaja was next to the king, because the project was so important to Nimrod. He was you know what? It's on steroids, all resources on this. So Shehu, so essentially when that happened, Uruk collapsed. He collapsed. He was in shock. So he collapsed. He went to coma. When he woke up, he tried to explain to everybody what had happened, but nobody believed him because he was a drunk. Nobody thought a drunken person could come up with that kind of project. So nobody listened to his side of the story. Now the only person that, surprise, believed him was Anu, the girl, the barrister at the wine house, essentially. So she was the only person that believed him. So long story short, they fell in love, and Uruk became more of a drunk now because because his best friend betrayed him, and number two, nobody believed the side of the story. So the only friend he had was Anu and the bottle, essentially. So his drunkenness was times two. So he became more of a drunk, and then he married Anu, right? And then he was working, and then Jaja became like I said, the second in command to the king. So Jaja did not even bat an eyelid. He was just he just stopped considering him his friend. He was just you know what, you're a worker now, come and work on the project. So Uruk was working on the project like a commoner, like a common worker. Do you understand? And he was a drunk too, right? So but he married Anu, essentially, and then they had a child. Her name was Babi, not Barbie, Babi. Babel Babi. So just think of her as Tower of Babel Babi, essentially. So her name was Babi, right? So let me just skip forward. So Babi essentially. So let's say 20 years later, essentially. Bobby's everyday life was waking up in the morning, going to the wine house with her mom, working in the wine house with her mom, and then at the evening, she and her mom, they would take some wine and some food to her dad's place at the construction site of the tower, where he was overseeing some of the workers that was working on the Tower of Babel, essentially. So she would take some wine there, and she would she and her mom, they would banter with some of her dad's friends, and then they would eat dinner together, and then everybody would close from there, and then they would go home. So that was their daily routine, right? But her dad really didn't have time for her, because it was, like I said, his drunkenness was it was the main thing. He was always fucking drunk, right? So it was just drink and drink. So she asked her mom for why her dad was always drinking, and her mom kind of explained the story to her that that project that she's seeing, that it was actually her dad's idea, yada yada yada, and the idea was stolen, and he hasn't recovered from it ever since, right? And the man in charge of it, his name is Jaja, and he was her dad's former best friend, yada 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 yada. So like, but Bobby didn't like. Bobby just like didn't like. She didn't get it, right? She didn't get why that was such a big deal for her dad. Do you understand? So so she grew up with that story, and then she also grew up liking like she took a penchant to architecture. So because that's what all her dad knew, right? That was the only time she had to like spend with her dad. That was the only thing they could bond over, right? Because if her dad was not drawing buildings, drawing the same Tower of Babel every time, right? If he was not drawing it, he was drinking. Do you understand? So essentially, she learned how to draw. She was like an architect, right? And so one very fateful day, right? Again, I'm skipping very fast now. So one very fateful day, our mom sent her to. She went to our mom's place essentially, at the winery. She closed at the winery, and she was supposed to take some wine and food to her dad essentially. So she took the food and wine to her dad. And when she got there, sorry, give me a second. Okay, so I just fucking checked the time now, and it's like 16 minutes, right? So I lied, obviously. I don't know how to compress anything. Okay, so essentially, she took the wine to Jaja's place, and she took the wine, right? Okay, I'm rushing, right? Okay, cool. So she took the wine, and when she got to like the palace, to where the site where they were building the tower, right? She discovered that she discovered that her dad was not there, essentially. That her dad was like working on the building. So they told her to like take the wine to her dad up like on the. By that time the building was on 600 floors, right? On the 600th floor, right? So they had like this very makeshift like ancient Sumerian type elevator, right? So she took like the elevator. She took the elevator and went there. And when she got there, again, her dad was not there. They told her that her dad had gone down, right? And then, so she had some wine with her. And then they said that, the wine should be for, that she should take. So the men thought that the wine wasn't for her dad. The men thought that she had brought the food for, like, the head of the project. It was Jaja, because usually the person that would bring, there was a girl that used to bring like wine and food for Jaja. She would come up the 600 floors every day, right? So she thought it was her, right? So when she asked for her dad, they were just like, he's inside. So they assumed that she was asking for the head of the project. So the head of the project was Jaja, essentially. So she took the wine, in long story short, she took the wine, and then she went to Jaja's like apartment. And then she saw Jaja, and then Jaja took the wine from her, and then Jaja drank the wine. And then, surprise, surprise, as karma would have it, Jaja got drunk. And Jaja got drunk, and then he slept. He slept with her, essentially, and then he also slept off. And then when she woke up, she was like, this is my chance, right? So she took the plan. And then she ran away with it, essentially. So when Jaja woke up, Jaja was like, look, the plan is no longer with me. The building has to stop. So he went to report to the king. Now, the king was very, very sick at this point, right? So that news was even more of like a blow to the king, essentially, because he was very sick. And now the plan for their building had gone missing, essentially. So he was very, very sick. So that was like, even made his health deteriorate even more, essentially. So the building had to halt, and all the men had to start looking for like Barbie, essentially. Like, where has she been? Where did she take the plan to, essentially? So they started looking for her. So while Barbie escaped, right, she escaped into the desert, essentially. Ancient Samaria, lots of desert around them. So she escaped into the desert, and while she was in the desert, she actually took a look at the plan, and then she discovered that the plan did not, like, not only did it not make sense, it could not, like, it was putting a lot of strain on everybody and all of the workers, because they were like going literally around the earth to look for raw materials to like bring back to the building site. So she felt that it didn't make sense for the world to build like one vertical building that stretched to the heavens, and that didn't make any sense. And that what made sense instead was to build like a building horizontally that would like wrap around the earth like a towel. the same way like a towel wraps around a human being, essentially. And everybody in the world could live in that one building. It will just be this horizontal building, and it will have, instead of just one building that just went up, this one would like wrap around the earth, and then it will have different, go through different landscape, different sceneries, and it will be very scenic, very nice, and there'll be different parts of it. So essentially just like a Noah's Ark on steroids. So she was like, you know what, here's my chance. They'll find me anyway, so before they find me, let me quickly like redraw the plan. So she started redrawing the plan, and she redrew it. She redrew the plan, essentially. And then on the third day, the men found her, and then they took her to the king. And of course, they were going to execute her. So she was like, so the king, so by the time she got back to the palace, right, the king, Nimrod had actually died. He had already died at that time. Oh, no, he didn't die. Nimrod was in palace at that point, right? But he was very, very sick. He was even more sick now, right? So it was his wife, was the queen that was like doing like most of the like kingly duties for him, right? So the queen was like, the queen was supposed to preside over like the case, essentially. So the queen was like, why did she steal the plan? Yada, yada, yada. So she explained to the king the whole story of how Jaja stole her dad's plan, yada, 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 and how she, how her dad has not like recovered from it, and how her dad is a drunk, yada, yada, yada. And how she has like redrawn. So the king was like, okay. The queen was like, that still doesn't change it doesn't still make excuses for her stealing the plan. That she's sorry for the story, but that doesn't make excuses. So she was going to like kill her, essentially. So she was okay. So they were, she should give them the plan, and then she was like, she presented both plans, like Jaja's plan and her plan, and then Queen was like, wait a minute. So they took the plans from her, and the executioner was supposed to take her away. And then the queen was like, wait a minute, like, did you steal 2 plans? And she was like, no. She stole only 1 plan. And the queen was like, okay, so what's like the second plan in your hand? And she was like, oh, she has like another plan, which is like, instead of building the building vertically, they would like build it horizontally. And she called it like the Towel of Babel. And she kind of like pitched the plan to the queen. And queen was like, she was like super impressed with it. So she took it to Nimrod, and then Nimrod saw it, and Nimrod was like, this is even going to be like a better plan, essentially. So Nimrod essentially fired Jaja and then reinstated, what's her name now? Barbie and her dad as like the head of the plan. And then they stopped using Jaja's like evil Satan Tower of Babel plan. And then instead went with like Barbie's like horizontal Towel of Babel plan. And then they started building the Tower of Babel. And then the tower was not complete until like 2025. In this normal 2025 AD. Right? And the whole of humanity lived in one building, and everybody lived happily ever after. Okay, so that's the end. 25 minutes, I think. 23 minutes, I think. I think this is too long for me to post on Instagram, right? I'm going to try, right? But it comes around, it sounds like it's too long for me to post. Do you understand? So I really compressed the story. Barbie's part of the story should have like a longer arc, because she's like a protagonist, right? But I can't compress everything. Maybe one day I'll try to like uncompress it, essentially. Again, I'll try to like post everything on Instagram, but I doubt if I'll be able to do it, because it's 20 parts, and Instagram doesn't allow for more than a minute of story. So that's like 20 stories, but I'll try. Who knows? So that's it. The Towel of Babel. Go figure. Again, it was God's idea. It was the Holy Spirit that gave it to me when I was like bathing today. So I was about to bath today. So yeah, that's it. The end.